Alright, so for number 1, we are using the definitions on page 3 of your notes, where a point on the unit circle corresponds to t. In this case, t is pi over 2, so we know pi over 2 is up here, right? It goes from 0 to pi over 2. The corresponding points are 0, 1 for pi over 2. So according to the definition, sine of t is y, so we look at the y value, 1. Cosine of t, or cosine of pi over 2, is x. So that would be 0. And then for tangent of pi over 2, it's y over x. So 1 over 0, which is undefined. I'll just put the u. Cosecant is 1 over y. So it's going to be 1 over 1, which is 1. For secant, it's x over it's 1 over x, take it back, so it's going to be 1 over x, so that's going to be undefined. And then cotangent is x over y, so that's going to be 0 over 1, that's going to give you 0. Alright, so for part B, t is 0, so a point on the unit circle corresponds to 0, so it's right there. I've highlighted in like a red color right here, so that's where 0 is right here. The corresponding points for 0 are 1, 0, so the coordinates right here are 1, 0. So sine of 0 is y, the y value, so in this case the y value is 0. Cosine of 0 is x, x is 1. Tangent of 0 is y over x, so it's 0 over 1, which is 0. Cosecant of 0 is 1 over y, so that's 1 over 0, defined. Secant is 1 over x, 1 over 1. And then cotangent of 0 is x over y. That gives you undefined. Alright, so for letter C, we have t equals negative 5 pi over 6. So there's a point on the unit circle that corresponds to t, negative 5 pi over 6. So being a negative angle means that you go in clockwise direction, so you go this way, stop about here. And so if we go 5 pi over 6 in the negative direction, going this way, we end up in 7 pi over 6. Okay, we end up in 7 pi over 6. So the coordinates that correspond to that angle are right here. Negative radical 3 over 2, comma, negative 1/2. So then the sine of negative 5 pi over 6 is the y value, negative 1/2. The cosine of negative 5 pi over 6 is the x value. So it's negative radical 3 over 2. The tangent of negative 5 pi over 6 is y over x. So it's negative 1/2 over negative radical 3 over 2. The 2's reduce, the negatives become positive, and so you're left with 1 over radical 3. 1 over radical 3, which when you rationalize, move this over, you multiply both top and bottom by radical 3, and you end up with radical 3 over 3 as your answer. Okay, that's for tangent. Cosecant is 1 over y. Okay, so it's the reciprocal of y. So the reciprocal of negative 1/2 is negative 2. Secant is 1 over x, or the reciprocal of x. So that would be negative 2 over radical 3. You rationalize this one also like you did for tangent, and you get negative 2 radical 3 over 3. That would be the answer for a secant. Cotangent is x over y. So x over y is negative radical 3 over 2 over negative 1/2. Again, the 2's reduce, the negatives become positive, and you're left with radical 3. Alright, so for D, there's a point on the unit circle that corresponds to negative 3 pi over 4. And it's right there, that dot right here. Oops, right here. And that ends up being, if you look at the circles that you drew in class, that would be the same thing as 5 pi over 4. So negative 3 pi over 4 is a coterminal angle to 5 pi over 4. So the coordinates for that point right there are right here. Okay, so based on the definition, we have sine of negative 3 pi over 4 is the sine of y sine of t is y, so the y coordinate is negative radical 2 over 2. Cosine of negative 3 pi over 4 is equal to x. Tangent of negative 3 pi over 4 is y over x, so that's going to be negative radical 2 over 2 over negative radical 2 over 2, which equals 1. Cosecant of negative 3 pi over 4 is a reciprocal of y, so we end up with negative 2 over radical 2, the reciprocal of y. We're rationalizing it, so we end up with negative 2 radical 2 over 2, which reduces to negative radical 2. The reciprocal of x is secant. Secant of negative 3 pi over 4 is the reciprocal of x. That would be same thing as cosecant. So secant and cosecant is going to be the same exact thing because notice the coordinates are the same, x and y. So it's just going to be that. And then cotangent is x over y. Well, that would be the same as tangent, right? Because if you notice, it's the same coordinates, x and y are equal. So we're going to end up with 1. Alright, so for number 2, we're moving on. It's related to 1 in that we're evaluating the trig functions. The thing is that now 9 pi over 2, if you look at your unit circle, you won't find 9 pi over 2, right? Because that's 9 pi over 2 is more than one rotation, more than one revolution around the circle. So to find out how much it is, you change it to a mixed number. So 9 over 2 is 4.5. Okay, and then I'll use a different color. So let's say we start right here, right? So that's 4.5 pi. So that's 1 pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, 4 pi, and then a half a pi would be up here. So we end up right there. The coordinates right here are 0, 1. Okay, and the definition of cosine is x on a unit circle. It's x. So the x coordinate in 0, 1 is 0. That's the answer. For letter B, it's negative 7 pi over 3. So we have the unit circle. Here's the x and the y. And then now we're going in the negative direction, but this is negative 2 1/3 pi, right? That's negative 7 pi over 3. So again, we start on 0. We're going in the negative direction, so there's negative 1 pi, 2 pi, and 1/3 of a pi more, so that would be about here, right here. So the coordinates right here are 1/2 negative radical 3 over 2, because the coterminal angle for negative 2 1/3 pi is the same as 5 pi over 3. So if I went 5 pi over 3 units around the circle, I would land right here, same exact spot. So sine of negative 7 pi over 3 is the y coordinate. Okay, because sine of t is y, the y coordinate. So that's this one right here. Negative radical 3 over 2 is your answer. Okay. Now for letter C, it talks about the even-odd properties, how cosine, I'll go over this in class a little bit more in depth, but if you have a positive angle, this is, the sign would be plus plus. If you have the same measure angle but in the negative direction, you have plus minus. So notice how Well, cosine is the x, right? So notice how the x is positive in both. Doesn't matter if you go, if your angle is positive or if it's negative, the x coordinate is the same sign. So cosine of negative t is equal to cosine of t. So cosine of negative t is 3, so then this is also going to be 0.3. And again, this is just one example. We'll do more in class, and I'll go over this concept in class. Alright, for the last example in the notes, we have calculator problems, because you're going to encounter angles that are not always going to be on the special angle list, right? So like right here, number 3a, sine of 5 pi over 7. We know that the calculator, well, we know that it's not a degree, it's a radian, right? So we make sure that the calculator is in radian mode. And on my calculators, this is what you do. You hit mode 2 times, and then you hit 2, because that's going to give you the radian mode. So once you do that, you just put sine, left parenthesis, because you want to tell the calculator that this is together. And so left parenthesis, 5 pi divided by 7, right parenthesis, equal, and this is what it's going to give you. Okay, that's letter A. For part B, cosecant. If you look at your calculator, you're not going to find a cosecant button, right? All you're going to see is sine, cosine, and tangent. Well, cosecant and sine are reciprocals of each other, and so this is how you would input this in the calculator. You'd put sine. Oh, another thing. This is also a radian because it doesn't have the degree symbol. Okay, that's how you know. So this is a radian. So sine of 2, right? But we don't want sine of 2, we want the reciprocal. So your calculator will have one of these two keys. So press that, and then equal, and then it's going to give you this. Another way around it is to put in 1 divided by sine of 2. That's also going to give you the same answer right here. So there's actually two ways of getting the answer. Just look at your calculator and see if you have this key right here or this key right here, and then they should work. And again, this is another option, putting it 1 over sine of 2.